Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD, pro natural physique athlete, back with another episode on Swole Radio. We got Dr. Mike Israetel back in the house today for round 2 of our talk on advanced exercise training tips. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thanks for having me back.
Hey, so last time we talked about leg training and we got a lot of great feedback on this, and today we're going to be digging deep into upper body training and giving you guys some advanced hypertrophy tips. So, just couching the conversation. This is for those really serious people who have been training hard for a few years and really want to take their gains to the next level. So yeah, I was thinking we could just jump right into this. Got some limited time here. Just starting off with chest training, Mike. Some of your tips.
Yes, excellent. All right, let's just get right into it. And feel free to interrupt me at any time when I begin ranting out of control.
Rants are great.
Oh, stop. All right, so chest training. The thing about chest training is there's a really cool tip from powerlifting that we can pick up that really, really changes the game. And the tip is sort of twofold, maybe threefold if you think about it in a more complex way. But all these things reinforce each other. So anytime, especially during presses, if you want to get to stimulating your chest more and to feeling your chest more, which is actually a quite common complaint. People will say, I'm doing my pressing, but my triceps seem to be the ones receiving the stimulus. My front delts seem to be the ones receiving the stimulus. I just have trouble hitting my chest. And interestingly enough, it's the folks without the really good chest genetics that seem to have that problem. It seems to be almost a universal thing that if a muscle has pretty good genetics for growth, it seems to, I hate to use this colloquial term, take over on exercises. At the very least, more technically, it seems to be very well exposed to getting a stimulus. And there's kind of like the very same people that don't have chest genetics that are that great end up having a tough time connecting with their chest and making sure their chest receives the stimulus. So here's the tip from powerlifters. You almost start to set up every press like a powerlifter sets up their competition bench. Not quite, but close. So what you're going to do is you're going to do three things. You're going to retract your shoulder blades behind you. You're going to arch your back slightly. You don't have to arch it a lot. And then as the implement, be it barbell, be it machine, be it dumbbells, descend, what you want to do is reach up and out, lifting your chest towards the implement as the implement descends. So as the implement comes down, you almost reach your chest out to touch it. And if it's dumbbells, of course, you go outside in your chest and below. If it's a machine, you go outside and below. And if it's a barbell, you reach up and touch just to wherever you're touching on, nipple line is a very good point to touch. Why these things? Because so powerlifters do this to shorten the range of motion, which you could be like, okay, that's exactly what we want, which is true. But they also do it to keep the shoulders safe. By tucking the shoulders away, it probably reduces the risk of having hurt shoulders. The thing is, shoulder pain and shoulder injury complaints in powerlifting is actually quite rare. But in something like American football or any other high school sport you use bench presses in, shoulder complaints in bench pressing are actually quite common. And you think, what are they doing that the powerlifters aren't? And what they're doing is they're leaving their shoulder, their glenohumeral joints and scapulae out in front. And that leverages a lot of load in there and ends up transducing a lot of force to the glenohumeral joint. But if you take your scapulae and you retract them back, it actually makes the lift less of a delt movement, seemingly, and more of a chest movement, which is great because it exposes your chest. The other thing it does is it pre-stretches your chest. If you take your shoulders and move them back, you're automatically pre-stretching your chest. And once you pre-stretch your chest, even though the range of motion has been reduced, it's been reduced at the top part of the press, up here, where it doesn't really much matter what you do because the top part of pressing isn't really a chest-focused movement anyway. That's a little bit more triceps typically. So what you're doing is you're converting the chest into, they're converting all presses that you do by arching, retracting, and lifting your chest up into movements that bias more of that bottom half of the range of motion for the chest, which, as some recent research has shown and some theory in older animal research has shown, tension applied at a stretch seems to induce more hypertrophy. And what it also does in this case is it allows you to connect with your chest much more, to feel that deep tension and feel that stretch. And it seems to work really, really well to get people from a place where their presses hit their chest for sure, but it's also feeling a lot of triceps and front delts, to a place where you do one set like that properly and you're like, holy shit, my chest was getting ready to blow up at the bottom. This is amazing, amazing pumps, amazing tension, promotes a lot of soreness, which are all signs that we're probably on the right track and getting a good stimulus. So anytime I work with folks in person and they show me some presses that they're doing and they say the chest activation seems to be somewhat leaving something to be desired, I teach them to retract, to arch, and to expose the chest, lifting the chest towards the implement as the implement descends. That seems to do a lot of really good stuff. It pre-stretches the chest, so at the very bottom of the range of motion, the chest gets hit like crazy. So that's a really, really big tip for chest stimulus. A related one is in that setup. If you could manage to find some dumbbells, if you're really leprechaun type luck, you can get a camber bar. But you can also do this with deficit push-ups where you put your hands on some kind of platforms. And if you can descend below the level of your chest, the problem with barbell movements is they end right at your chest. But some people, maybe dare I say most, are flexible enough that a lot of chest stretch under load can occur below that chest line. And if you arch and retract, that chest line actually gets hit really quick. So if you have dumbbells, or if you have a machine press, or if you do some deficit push-ups with maybe a partner puts some load on your back, you can get into this ultra deep position and pause and then come back up. I mean, that messes up the chest like nothing else. And I tend to think that sort of approach to chest training can take pretty much any chest exercise and make it way more stimulative for the pecs themselves.
Yeah, wow. There's a lot to unpack there. Those are great points about, how I think one of the advantages of something like a barbell movement or like a bench press for a beginner lifter is it's very easy for them to conceptualize kind of, taking the bar from point A to point B. It's a standardized range of motion. You touch your chest, you go all the way up. But as you get to this next level, you realize that there are a lot more layers to the technique, that you can still make very fine adjustments to subtly change, the range of motion, angles, and the force tension curves.
100%. And a lot of this is where the mind-muscle connection comes into play, because there's an element, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a little bad when taken to the extremes. There's an element of people in bodybuilding who are trying to front the idea that keeping it simple is usually better, and it's usually better, but not always. And to people that are over obsessing about minutia and technique and the mind-muscle connection, they'll say, listen, just go from point A to point B and get stronger. And that's a very good point. But for people who seem to have problems feeling their chest and whose triceps and front delts seem to get most of the stimulus from pressing, these minor adjustments can illustrate that the mind-muscle connection, which at RP at least we identify as feeling a profound degree of tension in the muscle and or a profound burn in the muscle for higher reps, that mind-muscle connection really starts to be something you can feel. Then you get more sore, then you see more growth, and you're like, oh, wow, okay, there really is something to this. So that modification of technique, I think, pays really big dividends. In addition to that, I didn't cover any sort of fly movements. The one thing I will say, and this may be mistaken and this may be controversial, but a lot of people really concern themselves with the crossover portion of the fly, and a lot of people concern themselves with maybe pausing at the top, and there's nothing wrong with that in flies, or touching the dumbbells together, or in choosing even machine flies versus dumbbell flies, because they'll say in dumbbell flies, you're not fighting gravity in the last portion, but in machine flies you are. What I have noticed, and this is in accordance with the literature, that the bottom part of the press, getting through that nasty stretch, seems to just be more stimulative than concerning yourself with the top part. And I've done years and years of experimenting on myself and clients and friends, unwilling friends, of, does the crossover part of the cable crossover, does the peak hold at the machine fly, does that make a big difference? And other than just an interesting variation to play around with, I just haven't noticed it paying big dividends. What I have noticed is focusing on the fly when you're at the bottom of the fly, really opening up your chest, really retracting your scapulae, really letting the tension throughput get really nasty. That's where I've noticed the biggest gains. So, because a lot of people will ask the question, this is a good question of, should I be focused on peak contraction? And I know, Joe Weider loved the peak contraction idea. There may be muscles for which that is appropriate, and some back muscles, I think there's something to it. But for the chest, some people swear by it. I just haven't found it to be super effective. And to the extent that my informal observations are valuable to people, I would say maybe if you've had trouble growing your chest, stimulating it, I wouldn't worry so much about that peak contraction and about getting that top end range of motion. I would be much more concerned with having really good strict technique and with making sure that I was hitting that bottom part. And lastly, what I want to say is, because it's so easy to standardize technique for chest pressing, and because it's I was going to say it's difficult to cheat, people find a way to cheat anyway with, they have sex with the air hip thrust in the bench press. I'll put it this way: cheating in bicep curls is like you have to try not to cheat, right? Cheating in the chest press, you have to try to cheat. So it's more difficult, it's more counterintuitive, because you can standardize your technique so well with chest pressing, and because cheating is, at least you have to go out of your way to do it. Slowly just increasing the amount of load you lift over time through a standardized range of motion seems to work wonders for the chest. Whereas in the biceps, for example, bicep curls, there's a very obvious trade-off between valuing load on the bar and valuing the mind-muscle connection and the pristine nature of the technique. Like at some point you're like, man, anytime I go above 95 pounds on the barbell curl, I know I'm curling nominally, I know it's happening, I just don't think the right muscles are contributing to it. Whereas with chest pressing, I think as you put more load on the bar, as you progress 5 pounds here, 2.5 pounds here, a rep here and there over the weeks, I think it's such a great situation for progressive overload, because there's a sense in which actually, as you get closer to failure and as the weight gets heavier, it actually pushes you into that ideal position even more. It's one of those situations where if you lose your technique on a curl, you'll get an extra rep. If you lose your technique on a press, you're not going to get any reps at all. And it is rewards staying in that groove, which is really awesome, because then it can simplify the process. And once you learn the technique and learn how to connect with your chest, you can just think about like, hey, listen, just go and get these little PRs, and it makes everything great. Because, for like nerds like you and I that are more analytical and mathematical, we just need numbers to plug in and go, and we'd love to see objective progress in a logbook. And it's not always that simple with other muscles, where at the very least, there's layers to it. With chest training, once you learn that good technique, I think it's a pretty good sign to just go and get stronger, and good things tend to happen.
Yeah, that's a great thought about, finding those muscle groups or those specific exercises where you can really get in that groove and really just push and, go for progressive overload, versus other movements where it just won't be that conducive. And chest it's always been one of those for me as well, where you can really go heavy and still feel like, oh yeah, I crush that with my pecs.
For sure. Now, I will say something, I don't know if this is politically incorrect. I'm sure some people would conceive of it as such. I think it's just standard sports science. I have noticed that Asian lifters tend to, first of all, just have great chest development genetics. On average, not all of us are that lucky, but also they just tend to connect well with their chests, and pressing comes easily to them. Whereas, for other muscle groups, that's not the case. So it's an interesting side observation that I've made. A lot of the best bench pressers of all time are Asian, and it's just it's neat to have a muscle that's like, oh yeah, I can rely on. Of course, some Asian person's going to listen to this and look at their chest and be like, God damn it, I didn't even get that part. Fuck. Same thing with calves, actually. The freakiest calves of all time are unanimously Asian people. It's kind of a trip to see. I've seen 120-pound Asian girls walking on University of Michigan's campus, and I'm looking at their legs like, what the fuck am I doing wrong with my life? Why do my calves look like that?
Oh man, that's great. Just trying to get the cleavage up, man.
That's it. Cleavage. That's your goal for chest training. Not big pecs. Cleavage. I want cleavage. Damn it. That's what I signed up for.
When a girl comes up to you and is like, your chest is bigger than mine.
Well, I will say upper pecs on a girl look kind of cool. It's a cool look, And I think a lot of girls don't train their chest much or at all, because they kind of think well, I have boobs, it doesn't matter. But it's definitely a different look. Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. I think they should. Mm-hmm. That reminds me of a funny story. I remember being in med school, and there were these two little Asian girls who they were just nerds. They just studied all the time. But I remember once they came up to me and they were like, Bill, we want you to train us in the gym. We want bigger pectoralis major and gluteus maximus. And I was just
interesting choices.
I love how, the gains are universal.
Yes. Did you agree, or were you like, get out of here? That costs money.
Yeah, I was like, check out my YouTube channel. I don't think it was
What
born
a
at
baller response.
But yeah, anyways, good stuff. And yeah, moving on to the back, I think this will be a really cool one for people to take away some value.
So, okay, there's so much to say about the back. I'm going to try to maintain some degree of conciseness. The back, as far as I can conceive of it, is composed of, we can at least give it sort of two mega regions. One is the part of the back so the erector spinae that run from your ass all the way up to your traps, essentially. And that complex of erectors, rhomboids, lower, middle, upper traps, forget I said that, lower, middle traps, because the upper traps get so much work from delt stuff and shrugs and stuff. You don't need to worry about that.
Cool.
But erector spinae, lower traps, middle traps, rhomboids, and a few of the smaller muscles there that control scapular movement, they are often sort of described as the thickness component of the back, which isn't so wrong. It's colloquially pretty decent. And then the other part of the back are the teres major, teres minor, and latissimus dorsi, which are sort of the width part of the back. And yes, lats can contribute to thickness and all that, but generally we conceive of the back and at least recognize that are those sort of two functional regions. The first region kind of does two functions, but it's two functions that are so linked together, it's difficult to do one or the other. That first region extends your spine and also retracts your scapulae. So this kind of like being born movement, right? I think it's medically called erection. You like that? No takers. All right. So, like basically like something you would do in, like, if you started your deadlift with real shit technique, rounded over, what you would do to stand up at the top, right? And that's a big part of your back's function. And then with the other part of your back is mostly concerned with taking your elbows and pulling them backwards, be that horizontal or vertical pulling. I don't think it much matters. I think some combination of both is really good. So once we conceive of the back as having those two major functions, it's easy to understand that some exercises will bias one function, some will bias another function, some do a pretty good job of addressing both. But once we understand that, it can really clarify back training. One thing I'll say really quick, and this is something that just kills me when I see it, is when people conflate lat training and back training. Like, there's so many more muscles in your back than just your lats. Mm-hmm. And some people use those terms reflexively, and it's just not true at all. So they'll be super ultra obsessed with, how do I get maximum lat activation? And they'll say things like rows are inferior to vertical pulling for the back. And it's like, no. They are for the lats, but not for the back. The back has a lot going on and something just pull-ups can't attend to. Same page for now, Bill? Should I continue? Do you have any follow-ups for that or clarification or anything?
Yeah, no, I think, it's really good to set up the anatomy as you did.
Super. So now that we know that, we sort of have a few different categories of back training to work with, back exercises. Maybe like we can conceive of sort of four categories. Category one is back movements that greatly prioritize spinal extension. So I have an exercise that I invented, even though I'm not taking credit for that shit. I didn't invent shit. It's just a stupid modification to regular exercise called the flexion row. And that's basically when you roll a barbell into your chest, but you start with a notably flexed spine. And as you row into your tummy, it's a standing bent row, you arch your back and retract your scapulae. And at the bottom, you protract your scapulae around your back. The flexion row, the deadlift, I must say, and a few other movements, you can do a flexion row positioned on a chest-supported bench or with any rowing machine, that greatly prioritizes hitting the spinal erectors and the lower traps and the middle traps and some of the scapular retraction musculature. So that's one category of movement that you can do, but you have to understand that it doesn't train the lats and the teres major and minor hardly at all. So a very, very small amount. So it's not going to get you a lot of width. It's not going to get you a ton of overall back size. But if you're interested in bringing up that thickness part of your back, especially that low to mid, you see someone from the side and the erectors poke out and you're like, holy shit, what the hell is that? And the side poses in bodybuilding, you're like, that guy's thick as fuck. Put him in the middle of the lineup. Like, that's the kind of shit that gets you. And it's not something that you can do with pull-ups. You can do a trillion pull-ups, vertical pulls, whatever. Your back will look cool, but that density and thickness from behind just won't do you any justice. Second type of back exercise is a general row, but in this general row, we make sure to essentially stabilize our lower spine such that it is not a limiting factor, because we know that muscles are almost always stronger in an isometric state than they are in a dynamic state. So if you freeze your erectors, you essentially get a nice block going, a nice frame in your lower back, and maybe keep it a little bit arched for safety and stability. And then all of a sudden, what you're doing is rowing with protracted or retracted scapulae, but there's no movement in the spine, or not nearly as much. That trains your lats to a significant extent, your teres major to a significant extent. It also trains the upper back musculature of the lower traps and mid traps and rhomboids and stuff like that super, super well. It doesn't train your spinal erectors much, or as much, because, well, you don't train muscles statically. Isometric training has been proven in the research to just not be as hypertrophic for a variety of reasons. So that's the second class of exercise, and rowing is important. I will say, if you are in a limited time frame, or if you just want a great overall back stimulus, kind of nothing really beats rowing, because it takes care of the entire back, right? The third kind of The third kind of back exercise that I can conceive of is generally vertical pulling, pull-ups, assisted pull-ups, pull-downs, and that is the compound way to engage the mostly lats and teres major. It absolutely engages other muscles as well, but those are the muscles that are being prioritized. Great choice. That's what develops more of your back width for you as opposed to thickness. And a great feature of that kind of situation is, because it is not pull-ups and pull-downs and assisted pull-ups of all kinds, essentially almost all vertical pulling, it doesn't compress the spine. And it seems that there's a special kind of fatigue called axial fatigue, which, when you compress the spine and you have to maintain spinal position under load, which occurs with bent over rows, deadlifts of every kind, of course squats and presses and everything else when you're standing up, that seems to sap the living shit out of you, for lack of a better term, in a very, very special way. Like, we all know this. Deadlifts fatigue you in a way that's difficult to describe. And you're like, I don't know, man, something different about them. And when you're tired, you go to the leg press instead of to the squat. And there's some of that reason is because the axial fatigue is really nasty. The great thing about vertical pulling, it doesn't really contribute to axial fatigue. And we all know from experience, and if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't had this experience yet, get ready, because you will. Vertical pulling is just not very systemically fatiguing because of that small axial contribution. So you can do like 5 sets of pull-ups and someone's like, pretty tough, huh? And you're like, I feel a great pump. It's amazing. But the stimulus to fatigue ratio is really, really good, because there's essentially no axial fatigue. So that's really good. And then the last category of back exercise is what I would just call isolated lat exercise, or lat/teres major. And that's when you're like lat prayers and things like that. Kasim has his like one arm overhead dildo thing that, whatever. I'm kidding. I'm kidding at Kasim's. And that's a great movement to really isolate the sort of lower lats there, that if you can't connect with it, it's good. And there's all kinds of ways to do those movements. They're not overall back builders, but they are a great way to add some lat volume to your program if you have a generally overall very thick back, well developed, but you're looking for more width and more pop in your front double. You want more of this shit coming out, then at a very low fatigue expense, those exercises tend to be really good. So I could go on about back for forever, but what I will say is, if you use a full range of motion, if you use a lot of overhead work, really stretching the lats at the top, if in the bent over row you go through a crazy ROM, really reading your scapulae under a slow eccentric control, or at least an eccentric control, not just dropping the rows, letting the eccentric control do its work, really let your scapulae be protracted by the load, really retract the fuck out of your scapulae, lifting your chest as you row. Those kinds of details, paying attention to quality, can magnify your back training like crazy. And I will say, I used to have no mind muscle connection to my back at all. I just did the movements verbatim. And then over time, I got so connected to it that for me, back training, like I could be half dead and still get a great back workout because of the technical qualities I've developed over time. I can connect with my back like that and just get in there and just, it's that full ROM, eccentric control, letting the scapulae move freely, letting the super range of motion go. That kind of stuff pays crazy dividends. The thing I hate most in this world, maybe not most, but it's up there, is when folks will do pull-ups and they'll pull up to just where more or less their forehead's at the bar, and they'll come down to where they still have like 15 degrees of elbow flexion, and they'll be like, yeah, man, I just don't feel pull-ups on my lats. Get the fuck out of here. All the way to a dead hang. And after the dead hang, and you can see Jared Feather doing this in some of our RP training videos, you can even elevate the scapulae extra to stretch the living shit out of all those muscles, and then all the way up, ideally, chin to bar. But if you're strong enough, touch the bar and pull ups to your clavicles. If you're really strong, this is quite rare. Usually you have to be led to do it. Try to touch the bar to your sternum. If someone's strong enough to do very good technique sternum pull-ups, it's the stimulus to fatigue ratio on those for the back, specifically for the lats and teres major, is out of this world. And it's just all good things. I can say a lot more, but I'll shut the hell up so we don't go over on time.
Yeah, no, that's a really good little dissection of back training. And I think back training is one of the like least well trained muscle groups, and also like the most difficult to master. Like out of all of them, and it took me a really long time to figure out how to even just connect with them. And that point where you can just hold your arm at your side and like flex your lat on command. That took a long time to figure out, and it was actually really cool hearing your breakdown of the exercises. I'm curious actually about your flexion extension row. I remember hearing something about this like a while back from some of the powerlifting guys talking about the like a synergistic effect between the flexion extension of your spine in conjunction with that sort of retraction rowing movement. What is your reasoning for combining those in the same movement?
I think that if you try to do loaded flexion and extension in a row, but you're not paying attention to what the scapulae are doing, you may find it hard to both know that you're in full flexion and know that you're being stretched, because at the bottom of a flexed position, if you protract your scapulae, it stretches your lower back even more. And stretch under load, of course, provides hypertrophy, so it stretches the living crap out of your spinal erectors. At the top, if you arch and retract your scapulae, that arch and retraction happens naturally as a human movement. I actually think it's called there's a subcategory of medicine. I think it's like emergency or essentially like military medicine, where if someone is like receives a significant amount of brain damage, they go into what they think it's called like extensor reflex, where they just go like that. Yeah. And the scapulae retract and everything goes like this, because these are natural movement patterns with a lot of the same crossover for general neural firing. And there's also the flexion or flexor reflex, which I believe if you get that, people are like, it's a large part of your brain's never turning on again.
Yeah.
That's why if you're like this after a car accident, they're like, yep, that's it, he's gone. So I don't know if that's not,
you can be, it's like
bad news. Yeah. So because those muscles tend to work synergistically together, it's very good to combine them because they reinforce each other and they make the movement click, for lack of a better term. You're able to hit those positions so well. For example, if I told you, listen, I want you to arch your back at the top of the row while simultaneously protracting your scapulae, you'd be like, what? Wait, hold on. Let me try it. And then it would just be, you would be thinking so hard about it, your just central neural drive would have to drop because your cognitive bandwidth would increase. Ideally, when exercises that are so clickable, so simple to perform, cognitive bandwidth goes into ape mode, and then your fucking primate rage can take care of the rest of it, and you can do the rest, right? Anytime a movement makes sense from you from a movement perspective, it's better than if it requires like 18 trillion neural connections for you to even conceptualize what's going on. So I think that's one of the big reasons why protracting and retracting the scapulae works so well with the whole movement of the flexion and extension of the spine, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I think we should call that the primate rage row.
Primate rage rows. You heard it here first, folks. I'm sticking to that.
All right. Yeah, that was awesome. And yeah, maybe we should probably move on to the shoulders, the delts.
Yes. Okay. So I have some stuff to say about the delts. This is going to be an interesting take. Hot take Tuesdays, or what's today? Wednesday, Tuesday.
It's a good day.
It's a good day. All right. So it's kind of common knowledge in many bodybuilding circles, at least today, in the thinking bodybuilding circles, that front delt work is either something you don't need to do at all, or you need to do a very small amount of because pressing takes care of front delts, which I believe is largely true. What I have come to believe over the course recently, of last 3 or 4 years of my bodybuilding career, is that is also largely true for properly executed back training and rear delts. I have gone months and months and months without focusing on my rear delts, without doing a single isolation exercise, and my rear delts are just the biggest they've ever been. They just continue to grow. And then it's like, well, of course that makes sense, right? Like the rear delts function in back training is in many ways almost identical to the front delts function in chest training. You know, obviating the obvious, like elbows don't lock out when you go back that way. It'd be kind of sweet if your elbows had a locking mechanism back here, you just lock out at the top of a row. But that's the situation there. So what I would say is, first point, the vast majority of shoulder training needs to be concerned with the side delts. Because the rear delts and front delts largely take care of themselves. Now, if you want to do or need to do some rear delt, front delt work, a very small amount, maybe 2 to 4 sets per session, once or twice per week, I think can really hook most people up with all the front and rear delt volume that they need. And that training's not very difficult to do. Another problem with really trying to target the rear delts is that every rear delt exercise, your body actually, to the last point of some movements are synergistic by nature, every single rear delt movement turns into a row. Every single, like, so hard to just do this and move your delts back versus protracting and retracting. And especially as the load increases and especially as you near failure, it's real tough to isolate that muscle. A lot of people have really nasty mind-muscle connection problems with the rear delt. We're like, how'd that feel? You're like, I don't know, man. I feel like my erectors and rhomboids a lot. I feel my mid traps a lot. Rear delts, sure, I kind of feel it. So what I will say is this: if you're having trouble targeting your front delts, any kind of vertical overhead presses work, any kind of front raises where you're keeping a thumbs up sort of grip, so take dumbbells and go all the way here and go all the way like this with a front raise, that should take care of your front delts just fine. And there's so many front raise variations that you could do them until the cows come home. If you really want to hit your front delt a lot, what I would do is either dumbbell or cable variations where there's a lot of tension at the stretch. So if you move your arm really far behind the plane of your body, easy to do with cables, also super easy to do with dumbbells if you just do it on a high incline bench, right? Just do the front raises like that. Man, that hits your front delts like something else. And if you keep that thumbs up grip and keep your arms close to your body, your pecs don't really do a lot of work in that angle anyway, so you're good to go. So that's for front delt work. For rear delt work, I'd say the real prized possession in rear delt work, which is also why the rear delt machine fly thing, you know, the reverse rear delt fly pec deck bullshit, I think is slightly suboptimal because, like every other muscle, or seemingly every other muscle, the rear delts get trained really well at a stretch. So what I'd say is cross body movement, which is usually better done with a cable than anything else, is really awesome for the rear delts, which means if you can do a double cross, like grab here, and do one of these, that's great. But a single cross is oftentimes even better. So, you know, a great rear delt movement is to take, you know, a cable here in your hand across your body. You can, it doesn't really matter what the elbow does. You can make it straight or you can bend it, whatever's comfier, but you bring the shit across, peak, contract, slow, eccentric, all the way across, deep stretch, and then back. Movements like that, I think, are really, really awesome for the rear delts. For the side delts, movements which stretch them are really prized. So if you can do the same cable motion except come lower down in your body and then come up, that tends to go really well. The problem with the side delts is anatomically they're just not positioned to receive a huge stretch under load. You'd have to like move through your rib cage, which maybe if you were like a teleporting X-Men, you could do. Teleport into your own ribcage. Oh shit! Your humerus stabs through your heart. Turn that off at the wrong time. So have you, Bill? Have you seen do you watch The Boys on Amazon by any chance? The superhero movie or series?
Oh no, I haven't.
Yeah, I don't want to have too many spoilers. But one guy gets teleportation powers, but they don't include his clothes. So as soon as he teleports into somewhere, he's naked. He's like, ah, shit. So that'd be a similar situation. So because of that difficulty in getting a stretch under load, it is possible to do a little bit with the side delts. One variation that works well is you grab cables behind your back. So you're sort of, it's like you're pulling stuff out of your butt. You're doing one of these. That tends to work pretty well. But honestly, I'm a big fan of just good old-fashioned lateral raises. Cable, they're great with dumbbells. You can do them to just above parallel and come down. You can do them to just above parallel, hold for a second for that awesome mind muscle and come down. You can do the super ROM laterals that we do at RP, which is where you come all the way up and back down. That does at the top tend to involve front delts considerably, but there's some kind of gnarly synergy there that goes on. Well, because your delt is designed to go over your head, like that's literally one of the functions of the movement per primate anatomy and physiology. It just, man, that stimulus to fatigue ratio of taking your laterals to above, significantly above parallel, is something magical there. One of the things I think that's magical is you end up going through, this is the hardest part of delt training right here, side delts, is keeping your arms level with the ground. And if you can go above and then slow the eccentric through that hard part, it messes you up like something real special. Whereas if you just barely get to it and then come down, it just doesn't seem to be as much of a stimulative movement. So I'm a big fan of large range of motion, lateral raises of all kinds, cables, different angles, and controlling that eccentric is huge. Now let's rewind that quick and think about, what do we usually see people doing with side delts at the gym? And the answer is pure, unmitigated, momentum generating fuckery, for lack of a better term. I mean, you take the 70s and you do some kind of bullshit like that, and you're like, yeah, man, big delts, and it just, your shoulders hurt and your traps are pumped and nothing else happens. For me, delt training is a real act of precision on the concentric and then a slow, painful descent on the eccentric. And as far as I'm concerned, that has worked incredibly well for my delt training.
Yeah, that's great. I'm super stoked that, we have the same views on kind of rear delt isolation training. And it's funny how in the fitness industry, like front delt training has become, like morally like demonized, whereas rear delt training is like on this moral high standard. Yes. Where it's funny, I feel like it's the biggest thing I fight in my YouTube comments is people just asking me like, oh, where's your rear delt training? Where I like, when you look at all my programs, there's lots of side delt work and not very much isolation front or rear delt training. And yeah, I think a lot of people, you really get a lot of stimulus from pulling movements. And if you do have the time, then maybe you should think about adding some more rows, like if you haven't, because I think a lot of people haven't even maxed out their back volume yet.
Yes. And also face pulls, cable face pulls, barbell, dumbbell face pulls are great for the rear delts, but they also hit your traps so well and they hit some of the forearm flexors. To me, there's something demoralizing about just doing rear delt work where it's like, God damn it, I've been training for 30 minutes and then this muscle's the thickness of my thumb. What the fuck am I doing with my life? And I think you said it really well. If you have the time, then maybe you can consider throwing in some stuff there. But it breaks my heart when people aren't even competitive bodybuilders, and I suspect many of your viewers are not. And they got these aspirations to get more jacked, which are great, and they're well on their way. And then they're pissing away minutes and minutes and minutes every week, hours every month, training their rear delts, and just the return on investment there. It's just not clear to me. It's like people who come into the gym to train delts and their first three movements are front delt exercises. Jesus, what are you doing? You already took care of that with chest training. And another thing is this, the side delts can take a shitload of volume, not coincidentally because they're leveraged so poorly to experience damage under length and condition that you need 10 and 15 sets sometimes per workout to really do justice to them, 5, 10, 15 sets. It's not hamstrings. You're not going to come in and do 2 sets of stiff-legged deadlifts, you can do 2 sets of stiff-legged deadlifts properly for hamstrings and be sore for a week. You're not going to do 2 sets of laterals and get big delts. You got to pound them shits because the quality tends to degrade after 10 or more sets. Another thing I have to say, and I know we're not covering this because it's exercise specific, but side delts benefit from high frequency, man. 2, 3, 4 times a week. You can get big pecs training your pecs once a week. You can definitely get big quads training quads once a week because their SFR curves, SFR, good God, they're basically the length of the muscle growth, the MPS curve, for quads is a long time. It's just so much has to happen. There's so much muscle volume that you're actually disturbing and disrupting and healing, and immune elements infiltrate and then they leave. With side delts, gee whiz, 2 days later, someone could be like, side delt workout messed you up, right? And you're like, oh yeah, I trained side delts. I didn't even remember. They're completely healed. So generally my experience is like if a muscle is completely healed, it's time to train it again, and you're missing an opportunity to get bigger. So with side delts, pound that volume, 5 to 10, even sometimes more sets per workout, and multiple workouts per week, which is, I promise I'm making a point here, because side delts are visually such a big deal breaker. I mean, fuck, if you have big side delts, you take over the world. And because they require so much work, the question of in my shoulder training as a concept, not necessarily saying shoulder training should be one day, how much room is left over as an opportunity cost for front delts and rear delts? And I submit that it's just not much room at all. Like there's so much work to be done training side delts. You should be focused mostly on that.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I love what you said about, got a good pair of side delts, you could take over the world.
Seriously, it's one of those muscles that makes such a big visual impact. And my case in point is Jared Feather. Google Jared Feather's physique. Jared is 10 times the bodybuilder I'll ever be. I have a bigger back than Jared does. I have at least similar size pecs, probably bigger pecs than Jared. My traps are way bigger than Jared's. My arms are similar in size to Jared's. On a 5'6" frame, he's like 5'11". So why the fuck does Jared look unbelievable and I look like a Hogwarts character or some shit like that? Well, part of that is I have a big blocky waist and he does not. But another part is that his side delts are from, I don't know where, Mars or some shit like that. They're just so big. He looks like an action figure.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anyone where I was like, your side delts are too big, and if you brought those down, you'd have a better package on stage. Bill, have you ever seen that on a bodybuilding stage? Like, side delts are too big.
Exactly. Like I personally think that side delts are the most aesthetically, like momentous muscles, and like in the fact that they have the biggest impact to change your physique because they are ultimately the widest point, like in your frame. Like if you have, if you're lean, side delts are the only way to actually horizontally make yourself wider.
Yes. And while upper outer lats can add to that equation, I have enormous upper outer lats and I'm still missing something because my side delts could be bigger. That front, it's the first pose judges see too, because we're both competitive bodybuilders or something. You come out, hit that front relaxed, you have big ass cap delts. One of the funniest things I'll ever see is when Jared Feather comes out in a lineup, and I got to see him win his pro card doing this. When he won his class for his pro card at at Nationals, he came out and they accidentally, I don't know why, they accidentally put him on center stage. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
There's a thunderstorm apparently over my house.
I thought it was a SWAT team coming for you.
Yeah, 50-50 chance. Start deleting my files on my computer. Protocol. Jared walked out at Nationals and hit that front relaxed, and it was just lights out because you were like, what the fuck is going on? He looks 3 times wider than everybody. That is a testament to side delts. And unless you have big ass side delts, it pays to just keep getting bigger.
Yeah. Good stuff. Wisdom for sure. So yeah, keep in mind the time. We should probably keep going here. So maybe going on to arms for the gun show. Biceps, Mike?
Biceps. Man, I'm the wrong guy to ask about biceps. Or maybe the right guy because they're genetically shit for me and I have so much trouble connecting with them. I'll say this. First of all, good technique pays huge dividends. people swing and do all this kind of crap, and there's no room for that in a proper program. Secondly, variation is critical for biceps because, like the delts, they can take a huge pounding, and it's good to train them 3 or 4 times, or two to 4 times per week. Definitely not once a week. People tell me I want to bring on my bicep. Oh my God, dude. Oh my God, real quick. I'm gonna keep this rant really short because we're not so long on time. But so TikTok is poison as far as I can tell. I'm kidding, but it is funny to joke because there's a lot of truth in that. And I remember we just put out a video series on TikTok. We're just like splice out YouTube and throw it on my TikTok. I have somebody helping me manage TikTok because I don't want it in it. There's nothing Christian about that platform. But I'm on TikTok and we're talking about like how to train your triceps better. And half the comments are like, because I was like saying, if you're training your triceps, you might, or your biceps actually, you might want to put them, if you do a bicep and back day or tricep and chest day, if you really want big arms, you have to make the trade-off to train your triceps before chest. And yes, you will miss out on some chest gains, but because you train triceps first as a priority, they're going to get bigger. So many people, maybe like 50% of the commentators were like, oh man, arm day, just do an arm day, arm day. I'm like, you stupid motherfuckers. Arm day is bullshit because one day of the week is not enough for your arms. Not even close, not even by a mile. Bill, have you ever had your biceps be consistently sore for 5 or 6 days?
No.
Has anybody? So at the end of the day, arms, biceps, you got to train frequently, which means you'll need a variety of movements. Point 1. Point 2, I have found that going heavy in sets of 5 to 8 reps for most people just doesn't do anything for the bicep. Not anything at all. It does a very small amount for the biceps relative to higher rep sets. Another thing that I found works super well is myo reps. Because the biceps take such a fucking beating, you can just continue to crush them. The systemic fatigue from bicep training just isn't that high because they're not very big and you don't lift a lot of weight with it. So one thing I like to do, last point on biceps, is if you can get them into a stretched position, you're starting to win a little bit. So cable curls where it's like free motion cable handles and you go behind your body, that tends to work really well. I wouldn't worry about the fatigue contraction too much. Another great exercise is incline dumbbell curls, where you sit on an incline like this and you curl up and you eccentrically control on the way down and get that deep stretch. What I like to do is a myo rep incline bicep curls. It works pretty well. So I take dumbbells, I do a set of like 15. I put them down, rest a normal amount of time. Then I try to get 15 reps on every set after that for 3 or 4 sets. I can't because I'm too tired. I'll get to 12 on the second set. I'll put the dumbbells down on my quads, rest for 3 or 4 seconds, and go again to get another 3 reps. Nasty. The next set, I'll only get like 9, and then I'll have to do another 3 and another 3 to make up for it. That kind of taking the biceps close to failure very often in any given set and in any given exercise, and thus in any given workout, seems to work super, super well. Another thing is find implements that allow you to train your biceps without irritating your wrists, your shoulders, or your elbows. I used to be leveraged really well to do barbell curls, and I loved them. But the bigger I've gotten, the more, like big guys tend to kind of sit out like this. I can't bring my fucking elbows in anymore. So goddamn much muscle everywhere that barbell curls just really wreck the shit of either my elbows or my wrists or my shoulders. I just have to pick which one I'm going to wreck. So a lot of times you want to find bicep training implements that are very kind on your connective tissues, and then just rock out with myo reps, crazy volume, lots of approaches to failure. Biceps are one of those muscles that if you seem to respond better to close to failure training, you don't pay as big of a fatigue cost. So instead of doing 3 or 4 RIR, 1 or 2 RIR seems to work pretty well. And that's kind of what I found to work best for biceps. If you have great bicep genetics, none of this applies to you because just traditional 3x10 training will blow up your biceps. But then you don't need to be listening to this part of the podcast anyway, because fuck you and your big ass biceps. Calling me jealous.
Yeah, no, I really like what you said about, I think with some of these smaller muscle groups, you can really start taking advantage of these more, like intensity type techniques like myo reps and all that, especially since you don't accumulate that much systemic fatigue from training them.
Yeah, I mean, you're not crushed after a bicep workout. Your biceps are crushed, hopefully, but the rest of you is fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. And then triceps?
Triceps. I have a few things to say that are notable. number one, there is a big push, and has been for a while, of preferentially using overhead movements for triceps because they stretch the triceps and thus put them in a mechanical advantage to be stimulated with growth. I think that's a good idea, but I will say this: you actually train the long, so it also preferentially trains the long head of your triceps. A couple things there. One is the long head is actually trained quite well anytime you do any kind of rows or any kind of pull-ups, pull-downs, and even the lat prayers. That trains the shit out of the long head of the triceps, and in my experience is actually quite hypertrophic. So because your pulling movements train the long head so well, I think that you can do a lot of your tricep training either in pushing down or pushing away from your face, skull crusher style, etc., and not have to go overhead much. If you do go overhead, it's often really, really great. I would just say be a little bit careful, because if you do a lot of overhead pulling, vertical pulling work, and a lot of behind the neck tricep work, which is awesome, you can get into a situation where you could acutely overreach the long head of your triceps. And I've done that before, and it was just a nagging injury that bothered me for years. And I couldn't figure it out until I realized, wait a minute, I'm actually on back training hitting this muscle quite robustly. So there is that to be said. Another thing, there is an obsession with the long head of the tricep that I'll never fucking understand as long as I live. I think it's this thing where people, that's the only head of the tricep they know how to name. They don't know what the other two heads are called. And it's almost like this like little insider thing that when you graduate from knowing nothing about lifting to knowing anything, it's the Dunning-Kruger of lifting. Like, what about the long head? Anytime I say anything about triceps, somebody inevitably drops into the comments. And by somebody, I mean hundreds of people. And they go, what about the long head, Dr. Mike? I'm like, God damn it, is that the only thing you know? You know, like, that's like learning about Picasso and then walking around like art museums in Paris and be like, I wonder if this is Picasso. Like, shut up, that's all, get out of here. Like, real artists and art critics are here, go away. So there's this obsession with the long head, and like, it's nice. Like, it's nice. The back of your tricep, it looks cool, but it's also not the cool looking middle horseshoe part. It's literally not. So, you know, you got to train the whole tricep. So overhead work is great. Push downs are great. Skull crushers are great. Jam presses are great. Dips are great. A couple of tips. One, eccentric control is essential. The part in the push downs where you control slowly and then come back down is amazing. Two, I honestly think that peak contraction for triceps is as overrated as it is for almost everything else, chest included. People they say they love to work with the rope extension because it gives them a great peak contraction. And my question is always like, yes, but the rope extension doesn't get you a real good stretch at the top. So what's the trade-off? Like, I've done a ton of rope extensions and I didn't really got much out of it. But if I do skull crushers where I'm like stretching and this part of the tricep here and a properly done skull crusher feels like it's just gonna fucking explode out of your arm. Amazing. There's also some research to suggest and some evidence that if you feel a lot of tension here, you actually can preferentially hypertrophy the distal end of your tricep versus the proximal end. I don't know about you, but distal triceps hypertrophy, I'll say it, fuck it, we're being racial today. It gives you the black guy tricep look. You know what I'm talking about? With the shit hanging off the little Dexter Jackson in his prime. Look at his triceps, you're like, what the fuck is that? How the hell? And you're like, I know his arms are big, but his triceps have that lower hang that's just magical. And if you have triceps that are mostly bunched into your rear delt, it's kind of like, it kind of looks blocky and like your arm looks big, but it's kind of like, I don't know. And then when you're hitting the back poses and people can see your tricep, that swoop just isn't there. So what I would say is try at least for a while, focusing on movements in which you feel a shitload of tension right here close to the elbow. Skull crushers, dips with your chest super upright and getting really, really low with the dip and feeling that nasty tension. See, forget about the long head for a while. Focus on getting stronger over time with good eccentric control. Keep those elbows in on skull crushers, and I think a lot of good stuff happens. Also, triceps are maybe the most easy muscle in the body to do agonist supersets with. So if you really have trouble with tricep training, push downs for a set of 20 or something, and a lot of times it feels yeah, I'm getting something out of it, but feels kind of warmed up. Immediately drop in and do close grip push-ups with a 4-range of motion for a set of how many you can. If you're really a baller, if you really get strong, skull crushers or push downs for a set of whatever, 10 to 20, and then jump on and do free dips. Holy God. You may be able to do anything like something like 5 to 10 dips, but every single dip is like a blowtorch directly on your tricep. And that's a really, really awesome thing. So if you really have trouble stimulating the shit out of your triceps, using the superset situation with triceps is a real good thing. Another thing, there is a category of movement in which if you do some tricep stuff before and then you jump right over and you do some presses, if the press has a situation in which there's a low number of degrees of freedom, like it's a machine press, technically speaking, if your triceps were so completely chemically anesthetized and they weren't even active, you could just use your pecs, because just pulling the humerus forward automatically extends the elbow if that position on the machine can't move out or in, right? It's just the pec. Your body knows this in a certain extent, and when your triceps are really, really tired, it will use your pecs preferentially, which has been confirmed by the research. So if we have people do tricep training and then jump on to the bench press, they actually get a really, really great pec activation, because your body's like, holy shit, our triceps are almost dead. Fuck it, fellas, turn the pecs up so we can get this movement going. That works until you do dumbbell presses. If you do tricep pushdowns and then get on and do flat or incline dumbbell press, it's actually impossible to just use your pecs, because if you just use your pecs, this is what would happen. No tricep extension. Watch. You go like this. That's it. You just drop the dumbbells. So in order for you to be able to extend simultaneously, all your pecs do is provide enough oomph for your triceps to have to activate. Pushdowns or skull crushers supersetted with dumbbell presses, oh my God, you're going to get to a point at rep 5 where you're like, holy shit, this is all tricep, and it's really, really awesome. Another thing is, because the triceps are leveraged really well to take eccentric load, especially at a stretch, yes, you can conserve a lot of time and systemic effort by doing these supersets, but they're rarely required, because the triceps just aren't that hard to train. They're kind of like, and this is not by accident, because structurally they're similar, they're kind of like the quads. If someone says, man, I'm really hard time hitting my quads, please get you on the leg press, hack squat, get you doing the shit properly, and all of a sudden, boom, there we go. Last thing, super quick. If you're in a position where you're asking yourself, where do I skull crush to? The answer to that question is, as long as your shoulders and elbows are okay, anything is the correct answer. It's just variation. I get this question all the time. Should I do a JM press that stops at my neck? Should I do a modified skull crusher that actually touches my throat? If you're flexible enough, it's actually a super great movement. It's holy shit, it stretches the fucker. Have a spotter, or don't use the Smith machine, because you're going to die. I actually had one guy, I forget what the conversation was about in YouTube. This situation was where like a skull crusher was being done to touch the throat, and one guy's like, better do that with a Smith machine to stay safe. And I was like, no, because you could just die. There's no way to get out of it. Like, at least with a barbell, you could just do this. With a Smith machine, it's a suicide machine at that point. So is this the right answer for touching on a skull crusher? Is that behind the head? And the answer is, as long as your elbows and shoulders are feeling okay, it doesn't matter. For me personally, I used to think skull crushers were only where you touched your forehead or you touched behind your neck. My elbows were so fucked up, I couldn't barely brush my teeth. I stopped doing that. I started doing this when I was starting the skull crusher. Also, pro tip, on a lot of tricep movements, removing your thumbs and doing a thumbless, what's in jiu-jitsu called a monkey paw grip, seems to work better for the elbows. It seems to not piss them off as much. What I would do here is, instead of my first movement being back this way, my first movement was to bend my elbow towards my hips. Bend this way and then go down. No elbow pain, unreal tricep connection, unreal tricep stretch, all good things.
Yeah, wow, that was awesome. Great points. And yeah, what you were saying about modifying exercise selection in a way that spares your joints, I think is a really important tip for bodybuilders, especially as they progress, where injuries become the limiting factor, like as you get more advanced often. And I also liked what you were saying about skull crushers not being just confined to this, station over your chin or over your head, where it's as with a lot of exercises, there's somewhat of a continuum of, of movement selection, where it's not just one movement, it's a spectrum of movements, and you can still get a lot of stimulus from different variations.
100%. It's like low bar versus high bar versus safety versus front squat. It's a lot of right answers depending on the context, and there's not necessarily like, one way to do things. Bill, are we going to talk about traps, or are we just going to be like, fuck traps? What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be awesome if we could touch on it.
For sure. So I'll say this. If you're doing lots of stiff-legged deadlifts, if you're doing lots of rows, and if you're doing lots of side delt work, like if you listened earlier in this podcast, you damn well should be, especially if you're doing very high range of motion side delt work, man, your traps are in the same position as your front, rear, as your front and rear delts. They're almost cooked, if not completely cooked. Can you do some Y raises and stuff like that to hit your traps? Yes, but it's also a front delt exercise. Can you do shrugs? Yes, but as many very astute, nerdy lifters pointed out a long time ago, there's actually a bunch of other muscles that elevate the scapulae, and the upper traps even are not is so dominant in scapular elevation as you may think. The primary function of the upper traps is actually going from here to here, which you'd notice if you do proper side delts with a full range of motion. Your traps get pumped like crazy. I was like, what the fuck am I? And a lot of people will be like, oh man, this is another common myth. Say, hey man, how do I get my traps out of my side delt training? And my usual joke response is like, I Googled a picture of you and Tom Hardy didn't come up. So your traps aren't big enough. Shut the fuck up and take the trap training. It's like bodybuilders who are like, hey man, my quad training's going great, but how do I minimize glute involvement? Why? Your glutes too big? Are you Ronnie Coleman? Get out of here. There's no one's ever been penalized on stage for too big of glutes. Never seen that happen in my life. No, you can be penalized for excessive traps, but that's only if you have small side delts. And if the way you got your big traps is also getting big side delts, it's not an issue, right? There's maybe one bodybuilder ever that had traps that were too big for the delts, and his name is Johnny Jackson. Right? Do you know who that is, Bill? You know who John Jackson is? But his traps start like here or some shit like that. It's just nonsense, right? So can you do shrugs? Yes. They are of limited value. What I would say is this. First of all, make sure you do in full range of motion. Really depress your scapulae at the top. Really contract and elevate them, at the bottom. Really elevate them at the top. A 1 second pause and squeeze, pulling your shoulders back a little bit at the top is a big deal. Eccentric control. A lot of people will do shrugs and they'll do this kind of bullshit where it seems like they're just like riding on a bumpy road and the truck's doing this. Don't do shit like that. Another thing is, in my experience, light weights for higher reps, lots of myo reps, short rest, really cook your traps in a really good way. Putting 600 fucking pounds on a barbell, it just doesn't grow your traps in my experience very much. And if it does, there's a massive systemic and axial fatigue price. I know there's that gentleman, with Alex something, it goes by Alpha Destiny on YouTube. He seems to be very convinced that, heavy power shrugs and stuff are awesome. And I've got all the time in the world for considering that. It has not been my experience. It has not been the experience of the folks that I've worked with. So I think for some people, if you're really you have no more cards to play, that sort of, work can be good. I will say another really great way to train the traps, if you're really interested in just real trap training, is to do Olympic weightlifting derivatives. So there's a movement called a hang high pull, in which you start from a hang position with the barbell, you use your hips to jack the bar up, and then you bring the bar, a straight bar, up to just above your head, and then you eccentrically control it on the way down. Decent delt training, actually. It takes your traps through full ROM, and because the concentric is assisted by your triple extension of the hips, it's actually an eccentric accentuated overload training. And if you really need the last, the last bit of trap growth ever, that is a good way to go about things. And I would say it's a much better way to go about things than I would much rather see someone hang high pull with 115 pounds for sets of 15 than I would doing sets of 3 to 5 reps with 900 pounds, bending the fucking gym bar and the power rack. Get out of here, kid. You're not Andy Bolton. Fuck off.
Yeah, that was great. I think a good takeaway I'm taking from this talk today is, really thinking about the biomechanics of the movements and which exercises are like actually most, efficient for training that specific muscle. And sometimes it's not, in alignment with our like conventional wisdom, as with traps were. So yeah, I think that was an awesome discussion, Mike. Rounded out some great muscle group training tips, and if this talk saved one person from dying in the smooth machine trying to do a jam press, this was all worth it.
The last time that I looked at this was years ago, but the highest category of exercise-related death was I don't even know if this is a term used properly. It was essentially like idiopathic cardiac infarction concomitant with just exercise. Like
Oh,
Bill's
okay,
50
like
years old,
sedentary, I
and
guess.
it's just like, yeah, just like 50 years old, and he's gone the treadmill and just has the big one and he dies. It's by far the most common way to die in exercise. But last I checked, one of the top ones was killing yourself by pitting yourself under a bench press in your basement and just dying, which is like super fucked up. And it's super fucked up because like it's so preventable. Like, look, if the big heart attack is coming, look, that's just between you and the man upstairs, right? Shit happens. But folks, if you're listening at home, if you bench press by yourself in the basement, there's one easy tip for you not to die. Just don't put any collars on the bar. And if you get in trouble and you can't get it off you, just tilt to one side. The weights will fling off. I know it'll bust your drywall, but at least you won't die. Yeah. That's my message. That's what I'm sticking to. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, everyone. That was a public service announcement for us from the, CDC.
Yes. We got COVID. So, yeah. We got people dying in basements. It's a big deal.
Exactly. So I know we got to run off, Mike. Anything to plug from your end? New developments?
New developments are top secret. I will say, if you guys listen to this podcast and you're super geeked about the shit I'm saying, but you have a bunch more questions, we have a Facebook community called Team Full ROM, and it's our Instagram page, just Team Full ROM, at Team Full ROM on Insta. Get on there, message the account, take care of payment. We'll add you for $30 a month. You get all the workouts, you get diet stuff, you get crazy discounts on tons of RP and Team 4 on products, and you get access to the Facebook forum. We have like 600 people in there right now, and this awesome, super positive group where you can post all of your training videos, technique. Everyone claps back and tells you how to improve. We have one rule in the group. It's don't be a dick. And if you're a dick, you get one warning and they just kick you out permanently. So this is a place where you can feel like you can really get your technique analyzed. You can ask any and all questions. Myself and Charlie and Jared will do like a weekly live where I'll ask, like Sunday generally, I'll post and be like, live question, post them here, people post them. And Monday I'll do a Facebook live where I answer every single question in depth. Those videos are saved in the group forever, so you can access old videos. If you want a question answered, you put it in the group, and then Tuesday or Wednesday when you free up and you've got all your work done, you can log in and watch that part of your video in which your question is. It's real good stuff. So that's my plug, is Team Full ROM is great. And if you want to learn more, I'm on YouTube, Renaissance Periodization. We have the gazillion subscribers now, and we're always putting out basically this type of shit, except I don't have a handsome young Asian doctor interviewing me. So I'm generally more sad.
Yeah, I think the Facebook group sounds awesome. I think that the RP community is just such an uplifting group. I've just noticed where it's really motivating, like seeing people posting about their progress and their transformations and just sharing a lot of useful advice. So I would highly recommend.
Thank you so much, man. And it's all the people. Like, we don't take any credit for that, but we will say, like, we have a one tolerance policy for being a piece of shit, because we all say mean stuff every now and again that we don't mean. So we go, hey, don't do that. But if you're like a repeat offender, like, and you think it's like the Reddit forums or something, and you call people this and that kind of name, you're out, because like none of that stuff is productive. So if you want a positive community, come on over. I'll make fun of you and I'll get myself kicked out. Ooh, that'd be bad.
Good stuff. So with that, I'll put some links in the description, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.